United Nations steps up efforts to push the warring parties to expand the truce. Houthis abduct and jail thousands of women since the start of the war. Landmines continue to claim lives of Yemenis nationwide. Welcome to Yemen Today TV. This is the English news with me, Tasneem Qandi. The UN Special Envoy Hans Grunberg concluded a visit to Sana'a. The UN envoy held intense discussions during the visit on how to pay salaries for civil servants, as well as issues around the ports, airports, and maintaining calm on the front lines. He also emphasized that the renewal of the truce is a humanitarian imperative, a political necessity, an opportunity that cannot afford to waste. The United Nations stepped up efforts pushing to renew the existing truce in order to prevent the parties of the conflict from backsliding into military escalation. This report has more.
The United Nations, through its special envoy to Yemen, Hans Grunberg, stepped up diplomatic efforts to renew the existing truce between Yemen's warring parties in order to prevent any resumption of the country's years-long military conflict. The UN brokered truce between the Yemeni government and the Houthi rebels went into force on April 2nd and was later renewed twice. Currently, the United Nations is racing against time to persuade the Yemeni warring parties and regional powers to extend the truce for an extra 6 months. In addition to extending the ceasefire agreement, the United Nations also seeks to expand its provisions. Under the UN auspices, the Yemeni warring parties previously agreed to halt all offensive military air, ground, and maritime operations, both within Yemen and across its borders. They have also consented to the entry of fuel ships into Hodeidah ports and the operation of commercial flights into and out of Sana'a airport to predetermined destinations in the region. According to the ceasefire agreement, the parties also agreed to meet under the UN auspices in order to discuss solutions regarding the opening of blocked roads into the city of Taiz and other provinces in Yemen. As part of the U.S. intensified efforts to renew the truce in Yemen, Grunberg arrived in Yemen's capital Sana'a to discuss with leaders of the Houthi rebel militia the extension of the truce that is set to expire next week. The UN envoy left Sana'a's airport during the past hours and headed to Jordan following his meetings with the Houthi leaders, who laid down a number of conditions for agreeing to a truce extension, and he left without receiving a clear response from the Houthi leaders regarding the UN proposal. Before visiting Sana'a, Grunberg also made several trips to countries in the region in an effort to push Arab leaders to support the renewal of the truce between the Yemeni government and the Houthi rebels. Last week, Grunberg visited Saudi Arabia and met with Rashad al-Alimi, president of Yemen's Presidential Leadership Council, during which the president and his government welcomed the UN efforts to extend and expand the truce. Senior Saudi officials also met the UN envoy in Riyadh and expressed the kingdom's strong support for the United Nations to extend the truce in Yemen in order to reach a comprehensive ceasefire and a lasting political settlement.
President Rashad al-Alimi hosted the U.S. Ambassador Stephen Fagan to discuss bilateral relations and developments in the Yemeni situation. The meeting touched upon the coordinated UN efforts with the regional and international community to renew the humanitarian truce and the stubborn position of the Houthi militia towards bringing peace and stability to the country. The U.S. envoy to Yemen, Tim Linder-King, stressed the need to bring Yemenis around one table to negotiate the extension of the truce. During Washington's Center for Yemeni Studies conference, the U.S. envoy said that there is an opportunity to give millions of Yemenis additional relief. He added that it's up to the Houthis to cooperate and expand the truce benefits so that civil servants, teachers, and nurses who have been paid in years can get paid. The United Nations mentioned the need of 18 million Yemenis to access to clean water and sanitation. The organization stressed that Yemen is one of the countries in the world facing water scarcity, as years of conflict have led to the deterioration of infrastructure, such as distribution networks, drinking water sources, and pumping units. The International Organization for Migration said that conflict displacement, harsh weather conditions, and lack of services have left many displaced persons at high risk. Thus, IOM and King Salman Relief Organization signed a new project that will benefit 31,000 displaced persons, host communities, and migrants. Many displaced families in Al-Dala are threatened with starvation after the humanitarian organizations abandoned them and stopped providing aid that was distributed on a seasonal basis. And the question remains, where does the money that is given to the organizations for the displaced go? This report has more on this.
Anisa Mahir is a displaced child who was deprived of movement due to her infection with polio. The war doubled her deprivation and left her without shelter, lacking security, stability, and necessary services. After her displacement from Sabira area with her family and her older sister, who was also infected with the same disease, to these unfinished homes in Sanah area in Al-Dala.
This is one of the families that are displaced here in the district, suffering from a physical disability. We call on the organizations to take a look at such cases and support them with humanitarian aid and medicines for the children.
This matter doubled the suffering of Anisa's family, as the majority of the displaced families in this camp, which are more than 400 displaced families from the north and west of Al-Dala regions, complain about the deteriorating economic conditions, most of which do not have their daily food and are threatened with starvation. All the displaced families in Al-Dala confirmed that the humanitarian aid provided by humanitarian organizations is seasonal and very limited, and they complain of manipulation and the omission of many names previously by some organizations, and that limited support has stopped completely in the recent period.
The displaced people here come from many different districts and conflict zones. They were forced out of their homes, leaving everything behind. They couldn't even get their own clothes. There are more than 400 families here. If you go now to their kitchens, you will find nothing here. They don't have food or any supplies. There are many humanitarian organizations, but no one is helping.
The volunteers who teach children in Sanah camp did not find anything other than this open space to serve as a site for their school, where they do not have classrooms, chairs, or any other educational components. Displaced families in Sanah camp in Al-Dala also suffer from the absence of necessary services, such as water and electricity. And the absence of sanitation causes children to suffer from skin diseases in light of the deteriorating health situation, which made everyone wonder where the millions of dollars obtained by these organizations go to, while it seems to be absent from those who deserve it in Al-Dala and other governorates.
Tribal sources confirmed that a violent explosion rocked the city of Ma'rib, resulting in the killing of the leader in Al-Qaeda. The sources indicated that the explosion was caused by an explosive device that targeted the car of Al-Qaeda leader. This indicates the involvement of ISIS in the process of liquidating the Al-Qaeda leader, according to observers. Women in Yemen continue to suffer from constant Houthi violations against them. This report gives more details.
According to Human Rights Association, between 2015 and 2022, the Houthi militia kidnapped 1,700 women in Yemen, primarily in the capital Sana'a. The UN Human Rights Council, at its 51st regular session in Geneva, stated that the rights organization charged the militia with being supported by Iran with abusing female captives in Houthi jails. The association encouraged the council and international groups to apply pressure on the militia in order to get the women who were being held captive released and to stop the abuse against them. According to most recent statistics provided by the organization, Taz had the biggest number of violations by the militia of the UN-brokered truce, which totaled 3,000 in densely populated regions throughout Yemen. In addition, Houthis were accused of using tanks, artillery, and drones to target civilians, killing women and children and demolishing thousands of homes. Since the start of the war in 2014, Houthi crimes had resulted in 14,000 child deaths and injuries. Also, the Houthi rebels are responsible for 70% of all cases of violence against women. The violations ranged from purposeful deaths to severe injuries to female civilians and activists and amounted to war crimes against humanity. Women in Yemen face many challenges in obtaining justice amid the absence of legal protection. Meanwhile, women and human rights organizations have been preoccupied with humanitarian relief as the war continues, with women continuing to be the first victims through systematic attacks on their lives and physical safety in the absence of psychological support, laws to protect women in armed conflicts, and a lack of commitment by warring parties to international human rights laws and accountability in Yemen. 8 years have passed since Yemen's civil war began, and women there continue to suffer, not just from the hardships of displacement, but also threats, harassment, imprisonment, and inclusion from expressing their political rights. Women in Yemen continue to suffer, while the international community turns a blind eye.
In Yemen, the truce has mostly maintained and the number of civilians killed by shelling or gunfire has stopped. Nevertheless, the prevalence of landmines in some areas of Yemen continues to terrorize many Yemenis. This report has more on this.
The ceasefire in Yemen has generally held, and civilian casualties as a result of bombing or gunfire have decreased. However, dread of venturing outside persists for many Yemenis since parts of Yemen are littered with landmines. A ceasefire between the Yemeni conflict's two parties went into force in April and has since been extended twice, most recently in August. The peace agreement has provided some relief to millions of Yemenis plagued by violence and famine. Even though the ceasefire that was negotiated earlier in the year is still occasionally being broken and the war is ongoing, there is far less fighting than before. Regardless of whether combat ends or not, there is still another threat present. Many mines were planted during the conflict, and while both sides accuse the other of doing so, neither side really admits to planting the mines. As a result, some areas of the nation have been transformed into true minefields, and regular citizens living there constantly worry that they would stumble across one while going about their daily lives. Although the number of casualties from regular fighting had dropped by almost two-thirds, landmines and exploded ordnances now account for the majority of recorded injuries. Even though the truce is still in effect, casualties from landmines and unexploded ordnances have continued to grow. Civilian casualties have dropped by more than 50% during the first 3 months of the truce, compared to the previous 3 months. Mines also impede the provision of desperately needed supplies and prohibit Yemenis from growing or harvesting crops. Yemeni officials have not disclosed any figures on the number of individuals injured or killed by landmines. However, the president of the Yemen Landmine Monitor stated that his group has identified 426 individuals killed by mines between the middle of 2019 and August 2022. This includes almost 100 children. More than 560 people have been harmed in mine accidents, according to the organization. Women and children are once again overrepresented, with 216 children and 48 women among the injured.
Coming next. The Yemeni musician and YouTube star Ahmed Al-Sheiba dies in New York.
أقول لك راحت بالغداء لأهلها، شلت الغداء وراحت بالأهلها في المزرعة. والمزرعة ركبت على حمار ما حتى نص المزرعة وانفجر فيها اللغم، دعست على اللغم وانفجر فيهم. الحمار انتهى، الماء ترفت بقعت رجليها كامل. نغير منها نغير الشبالة اللي هي البيت سابها من دور رجليها، لما صافناها طبيها أقرب طبيها وصافناها لا هي بطلت رجليها كامل.
قلت أزود هلي وقابل لي لعام وطبعته تحت الزواية. صورت
Welcome back. After he amazed the world with his beauty of the Oriental music through his playing and skill on the lute, the Yemeni artist Ahmed Al-Sheiba shocked his fans with the news of his death after a traffic accident in New York. This report has more on this.
His lute has stopped humming forever before reaching the early 30s. The Yemeni oud player Ahmed Al-Sheiba has died following a traffic accident in New York after he granted many people with joy and happiness through the chords of his lute. The oud player was best known for his arrangements of popular international songs, and he was famous for his oud renditions of hit songs such as Michael Jackson's Smooth Criminal and the theme songs of Game of Thrones and Pirates of the Caribbean. After his first public performance in Cairo in 2007, Al-Sheiba rapidly shot to fame, eventually performing for the likes of Hillary Clinton and the presidents of Turkey and Yemen. In recent years, his videos blending Arabic classical and contemporary music with international pop as well as other genres transformed him into a social media influencer. He frequently collaborated with several international musicians, taking inspiration from different styles around the world. Al-Sheiba also released videos of himself performing originals, such as Malahide, from his most recent album of the same name, released in August. On Malahide, which was composed after he was denied permission to visit the castle of Malahide in Ireland, Al-Sheiba dances through Irish jig-inspired melodies, accompanied by a multinational backing band on canon, piano, bass, Irish flute, and drums. A self-taught musician has demonstrated remarkable technical ability, drawing upon a broad range of stylistic influences, with an uncanny ability to blend them seamlessly into his own unique style. Following the news of his death, several people expressed their sorrow on social media. One user described him as one of the most prominent Yemeni young musicians, adding his death was not just a loss for the music community, but Yemen's younger generation.
Yemen Policy Center in Taiz is participating in podcasting platform in celebration of the International Podcast Day. The aim of this participation is to broaden the vision of peace in Yemen. The center launched a variety of podcasts covering a lot of topics, inspirational stories and ideas to the goal to rethink peace in Yemen. The Yemeni embassy in Turkey celebrates the 60th anniversary of the 26 September Revolution. This report has more on this.
The Yemeni embassy in Ankara celebrates the 60th anniversary of the September 26 revolution. The ceremony was attended by a number of the Yemeni community, Yemeni students, and Yemeni officers studying at the Security Academy in Turkey. Ambassador Muhammad Saleh gave a speech in which he stressed the celebrations of the Yemeni people for the Yemeni revolution, which comes under difficult circumstances in Yemen as a result of the coup of the Iran-backed Houthi militia against the state and its institutions, stressing that the Yemeni people who rose up in the face of the Imamate will stand behind their constitutional legitimacy until the coup ends. He stressed the importance of celebrating the September 26 revolution and the need to defend the achievements and gains and preserve the republican system and the right of equal citizenship and human dignity, which is what the constitutional legitimacy of the Yemeni people is doing now under the leadership of President Rashad Al-Alimi, chairman of the Presidential Leadership Council.
This is a great celebration that we've gathered for. It's the 60th anniversary of the September 26th revolution. This revolution gave us our freedom from the Imamate, darkness and ignorance. I would like to pay tribute and respect for martyrs who've sacrificed their lives. Let's take a minute of silence to pray for them.
Ambassador Tariq indicated that as a result of the Houthi coup, the post-revolution generations have become aware of the greatness of those sacrifices that were made by martyrs with the revolutionary convent. The 26th September Revolution brought Yemen out of the darkness and into enlightenment, freedom, social justice, and growth. It's a revolution in which thousands of martyrs gave their precious lives to allow future generations to live in freedom and dignity in a homeland characterized by social fairness, security, and stability. Finally, Ambassador Tariq expressed deep gratitude on behalf of the Republic of Yemen, the leadership, and Turkey for standing by the Yemeni people in this celebration.
An expanded meeting held in Aden, chaired by the Minister of Agriculture, discussed the situation of fisheries in the Gulf of Aden. The minister gave a direction to form a technical committee in order to estimate the inventory in fish landing centers in Aden, Lahj, and Abyan. He also directed to evaluate buildings, facilities, central refrigerators, and fish storage in order to repair the damage caused to those centers and return them to service. Here is a reminder of the main headlines. The United Nations steps up efforts to push the warring parties to expand the truce. Houthis abduct and jail thousands of women since the start of the war. Landmines continue to claim lives of Yemenis nationwide. This is the end of the news. It was Tasneem Qandil. Thank you for watching.